Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Mike Hiltz, VP and CISO at Nference. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matthew. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for coming on. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. Hackers are getting smarter. Is your security keeping up? CyberLink sells industry-leading AI-powered cybersecurity solutions that detect threats in real time, so you know about an attack before the damage is done, not after. Learn more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyber, L-Y-N-X.com. And now back to our show. Mike, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Nference and your role there as CISO?
Sure. Nference works with academic medical centers to take patient data. There's lots of it out there, millions and millions of records, longitudinal data, multi-years worth of data, as well as structured and unstructured data. You have things in electronic health records that easily obtainable, right? They're in specific columns, but you also have things like doctors' notes, different types of telemetry. You're getting digital pathology, genomics. How do you make that something that you can compute and search on? So Nference helps these academic medical centers like Mayo Clinic, Duke University, helps them to make that searchable, and we make it available for research, whether it's our own internal research or we bring in customers. And that's really how Nference makes money, is bringing in these customers that want to do this type of research on patient data.
I mean, let walk me through that. I mean, I think everybody gets the whole like electronic medical records, right? You've got all of that kind of stuck in this system, and they don't usually talk well, with other systems. How do you go about collecting that? Saying what you can, obviously, but
Yeah.
how do you go about collecting that and securing that, and then allowing that to be searchable, while protecting, patient, data and confidentiality and security? This seems like a challenge there.
Yeah, I think Nference had a novel idea. Let's deploy our solution in your environment and help you to de-identify that. With electronic health records, you have to have basically, there are a couple of ways to de-identify data. And one is to use this expert determination. So what we do is we have AI machine learning to help de-identify the data. We get access to a very small subset of that data through the agreement. And then we write software that our data partners will use to then de-identify their full data set. We'll get access to that fully de-identified data set after that expert determination.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And I think, AI is obviously, the big, buzzword of the day, and rightfully so. And so is this something that Nference is now able to do even better because of, the advances in AI, that, the recent advances there, or is it something they've been doing long before, and it just, we're just kind of catching up?
Yeah, I think they've been doing it long before. Obviously, they've developed models for doing some of the de-identification. It's definitely making it easier. The advancements in AI, the additional models that you can bring in that are pre-built. We're doing some, obviously, continuing to do development and additional work in that area. Now we can do things like agentic, right? So you're taking multiple agents and orchestrating some of that de-identification or orchestrating that synthesis of data. So it's continually growing. I think there's a huge opportunity to leverage that against that data to improve patient outcomes. Now we have access to patient history. What medications did they take? How are they going to then be treated by a physician? The types of medications they've been treated for, and how we can drive future treatment, right? I think that's important. We can do things, and it's not us making a decision or the AI making a decision, but allow a physician then to leverage that information in the way they treat the patient in the future.
Yeah. Well, and as a CISO, how is it? There's so much now going on with with AI when it comes to security, right? I mean, I think we see some really cool products, and I talk about this one all the time. I love how Darktrace is using AI to kind of to help secure not just the endpoint, but the cloud, email, you name it, and not just slapping an LLM onto a traditional security product, but now kind of building it with using the right kind of machine learning to identify what's going on, what's normal, and say that's not right and stop it. So I think we get to see things, products like Darktrace, I think give us a glimpse of the future as to where security is going to go, how we fight the bad guys. And this is one of my favorite topics because I think we can, kind of really dive in there, and it's super exciting to me. But I think that as you look at that from a CISO's perspective, what is it that you're seeing and doing today, to kind of, do you get to leverage AI today to help secure the enterprise, the organization, or is it something that where you're holding off until things get a little more advanced?
No, I think even today, vendors now are including more AI features in their products. Vendors like Darktrace, there's other vendors that are taking a look at, we really started with, and especially in the AI or the data space related to patient health, you've got PHI, PII. They started with really basic classifiers, right? Okay, now you can classify the data and you can maybe see movement or a configuration issues with the data, but can you see the lineage? Where did the data start from? Where did it move to? How did it move? And I think that's where AI is going to help us advance. Again, if you have that lineage, now you can understand a little bit more about your topology, the risk related to that data movement. Now throw in things like artificial intelligence agents that are non-human identities running some task. You have MCP, same thing, right? Non-human or humans interacting with MCP or agents interacting with MCP. You need the entire telemetry, right? To really make determination about the risk of that movement. And that's where AI, I think, is going to help us accelerate for detection.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it now, we've got these machine speed attacks, right? So not only are you when you talk about the internal, issues of, hey, is there an insider threat, but even externally, right? So for these machine speed attacks that are coming at us, finding vulnerabilities that have been out there for decades, gone completely undetected, and now they're able to be exploited at machine speed. That's scary. However, I think it's only scary if we're taking the traditional security approach of, patch and, okay, sure. If that's your defense is traditional, measures, then yeah, that's super scary. But I think you have to fight fire with fire, and you have to be using AI. Something has to be working at machine speed to identify something new, something abnormal, something that you didn't catch, right? If it can just blow right through the firewall, can go right through the defenses, you have to be able to see that now, right? And I don't think traditional tools don't allow us to see that. We need AI now, I think, to secure any size organization. And honestly, the smaller, the more important that becomes, because they tend to spend less on security than the larger organizations. They're like, we're 50 people, we're 100 people, we're only 500 people. We're a tiny company, we're only 2,000 employees. Like, who's coming after us when they could go after the big guys? They come after you because you're an easier target. You're not spending as much on, look at MGM. They spend a fortune on security, and yet somebody can still get past their security. You have to be a lot more advanced. You don't have to be that advanced to get past a small organization that's only got a few hundred people who doesn't, because they don't have the budget that MGM has, right?
And that's also a risk for the large organization. When you look at things like supply chain,
Yeah.
what is your supply chain? Is it the small organization?
Yep.
Uh, so it's always going to be a consideration for the large companies. I do agree with you. The small companies, while they need these same types of defenses, maybe don't have the budget for these same type of defenses. Uh, AI at speed too. You're right on. If you're not responding in a minute or two, you're probably you're cooked, right? I
Yeah.
think AI is going to make it very easy. Mythos, right? They pulled that back. I think some of Mythos was hype. Yes, they're identifying vulnerabilities. I think these vulnerabilities probably existed, but also what are the risks around those vulnerabilities? They looked at, okay, we can detect them, and obviously there's a ton of CVEs out there. Which are the ones that can be capitalized on? And it, we that's why we have things like defense in depth. But the only thing that really is going to see that defense in depth, that whole telemetry, is an AI system because these are mostly disjointed systems that have various connections. Humans are involved. I like the fact that you went to kind of behavioral, right,
Yeah.
analysis. Um, that's been going on for a long time now. I think it's the behaviors are going to be easier to identify and detect using AI. They were doing a lot of, heuristics and uh, is this user normally do these things? AI is going to be a lot better at analyzing the end-to-end heuristics than we can do with some of the algorithms we wrote or it's all mathematics when it comes down to it. AI is just going to do a better job of it.
Yeah, no, and we see that even in kind of like I think email's a great example, right? We've been fighting this fight against spam and and to secure the inbox for as long as there's been email, right? And I think you can see we're both old enough to have seen the the trajectory that it's taken, right? Every step along the way, as we slowly get better and better at filtering these things out, now we've gotten to the point where the bad guys they're able to leverage platforms like you name it, like e-sign accounts, right, where they're leveraging a perfectly legitimate site, and then they send that to you, and it's got the malware baked in. How are you can't just filter it out, right? Because everybody's using that same e-sign account, right? Everybody's using, well, let's just say everybody's using DocuSign, it's legitimate, and they're like, well, and yet, right, how do you filter that out from a traditional security standpoint? That's really hard to do. And this is where AI comes in. And it's like, yeah, I get it. It's really clear to you and I that this DocuSign is fake. But how do you tell a computer that when it's like, no, DocuSign for sure. I checked the records. DocuSign is legit. They've got a good reputation. And yet this email is clearly a threat, right? And I think that's where AI really comes in handy. And you see that today in the difference between an AI powered email tool and a traditional one. And I think that ends up saving so much time and so much effort that I think ultimately we're going in the right direction. So where the end user, and we're starting to see it, the end user gets to be the end user doing whatever it is. If Jane is great at accounting, she shouldn't also have to be great at cybersecurity, right? That's not her job, right? And if Jimmy is great at operations, he also shouldn't have to be great at identifying, is this email suspicious or not? What? Like I think that's a failure on the tech side of things, right? I think success for IT is that we've allowed the end user to do their job full time without ever having to worry about the security or IT at all, right? And I think AI starts to make it simpler and easier. That the technology is getting there to where people are able to work more on what they're doing. And you start to see it a little bit with things like coding, right? You can now vibe code your way into just about anything with the help of the right LLM, and boom, you've got something really functional for your job, and that works. Great. It's early days, and it's really cool, and it shows you kind of the future. But I think it's a glimpse of the future of end users being able to really leverage technology to do what they need for what they, without having to be a tech expert. Because you take a look at old people and 15, 20 years ago, they couldn't it was so hard for them to use technology because you had to be good at the technology. And they had to learn new things. But now old people can get in there and just say what they want it to do. And The
My
LLM
dad,
produces it.
this is hilarious. My father does the same. He used to just always call me, and Dad, every time he calls, so now, but when he wants my attention, he'll send me a text, but he definitely does like voice to text. He doesn't like typing,
Yep.
but just to see my dad, and so every once in a while I'll pop off with an emoji, and I just start rolling. I think it's hilarious that my father, right, is now texting and sending emojis,
Yep.
or he'll send me a GIF or something. It's just absolutely funny. But I also worry about him. You mentioned, he can't he looks at an email and he's going to respond or do something with it. And I do think it's maybe, I worry that we're trusting, though, too much of the technology to protect us. I still think education's important. That's where maybe we differ a little bit. I still
Well, this will
think
be interesting. Let's do it.
yeah, no, I still think that we have to educate, and I think we're doing a disservice by not educating maybe the older generation, people like my father. I think there should be more reaching out to maybe some of these elderly populations and saying, hey, this technology can be scary. Here's how you can protect yourself. Yes, there's technology to help protect you, but it's not infallible, right? Even AI can't 100% detect AI doing malicious things. You still have to have some security awareness. Wow, I hate using that term, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
do. You have to have some security awareness. You're military, right? You have to have situational awareness. I think this is just as the same concept, but more related to technology. How to use technology responsibly and protect yourself because the technology is not always going to do it.
Yeah, and I think that is absolutely true today. I think there's no two ways about it. The technology is not there yet, but I think the we're headed in the right direction. I think the drive and the need is there. When you look at the elderly population, the billions of dollars a year that they are losing, which this is the real shame. You take billions of dollars from from businesses, from younger people, no problem. But you're wiping, the cyber criminals are wiping out the savings of elderly people who have no way of replenishing it. There's no time and no way to replenish. It's just the most horrific thing. And yet the technology is not there to protect them. But I do see that in the not too distant future, I can see using having technology where when they're on the phone, Siri can be listening to the call and be like, "Hey Matt, that is," or Grandpa Matt, that is not Microsoft calling you. This is a scam. I'm going to hang up on them now. Okay, cool. Why not? It's so evident. It would so evident to an LLM if it was listening to that, like, yeah, this is a scam, right? And ultimately, I think it'll get to that point where it will be the 99.9% solution, right? And that 0.1% won't matter. If that gets through, it won't be enough to fund the entire cybercrime industry like it is right now. And I think the only way that we beat them at their game is that we use AI to shut them down. Because right now they're using it to win and they're winning, right? But as we start using it more and more on the defense and we get better products, I think, again, things like Dark Trace, Abnormal, where they're using it, right on the kind of the front lines to protect people. I think that's super important. We're not there yet for for the elderly population, but I do see that day. And I think the day will come where the end user never worries unless they're in tech, they don't worry about it. The security is handled because just like driving a car, right? You look back 5 years ago and it was driving like a drunk toddler. Now now it's impressive. It is really, really impressive how quickly it responds. And now you can see, I've been in the car twice now where the autopilot reacted way faster than I could have to incidents. And I'm like, wow, that was impressive. And it was like eye-opening that we're not going to be behind the wheel controlling this in not too long. I mean, a few years, and it'll make no sense for a human to be touching it. Because I'll give you a quick example. We were driving back from New York, and this car in the lane beside us, it was median. us and this car, and we're on autopilot, and this car swerves into our lane. At the same time, our car swerved to avoid it and slowed down just enough to where it wouldn't have been an issue. Now the car didn't hit us, but it happened at it was like it was synchronized. There's no way I could have reacted that fast. He came over very quickly, and it all happened so quick without slamming on the brakes, without slamming into the median. It was impressive. And so I was like, okay, that's the future. This is where we're going. So I think that's where we end up going ultimately with security and security awareness training. I think will be a thing of the past. I hope will be a thing of the past, and safely so though. But I'm curious what you think. I mean, I said a lot on it. That's my whole
No,
spiel. What do you got? What do you
no,
think?
I agree. I like your analogy too, with the car. I'm hoping in the near future we get there. Again, because the threat actors so far have seemed to be ahead of us, and they can develop again, we're trying to block the release of Mythos, right? They just pulled back Fable 5, right?
Mhm.
How can we, as the defenders, not having access to those tools, protect ourselves when the threat actors have the ability, to even develop their own models, to use open source models that are almost as capable as some of these flagship models, to attack, and they're holding these frontier flagship models back. Uh, is there ever going to be a time where the defenders have the advantage?
I think so. And now it may be because I'm an eternal optimist, and I always cheer for the underdog and the good guys. But I think that ultimately what happens is right now we are in a time and a space where we have so much kind of legacy technology, so many vulnerabilities that have gone un uh I guess, unexploited for so long that it has lulled us into a false sense of security. And I think we have been, as an entire industry, lulled into a false sense of security for decades, where it's like, oh, look, yeah, I hear that there's all kinds of problems and it's like a lightning storm out there, but we've never been hit. And so you think, hey, look, we're fine. It's just luck. That's just pure dumb luck. Now, now that the bad guys have access to AI, to have machine speed attacks, to find them and exploit them, and they make billions of dollars a year that they use to have very organized, criminal enterprises now, to where they've got marketing departments, they've got HR departments. It's full on enterprise over there. So now we're competing against a well-funded criminal, or enterprise, no, industry, which is entirely different. And so now we're in this short period of time, I think, where we've got a very solid uh, adversary. And I think that as those products like Darktrace come out and are used more ubiquitously across all industries, and large and all sizes, large and small, I think then the defenses become so hard that the bad guys get behind. It's at that point when we get to start using these advanced models, because right now the bad guys, I think they do have the upper hand, not because the technology isn't there for the good guys, but because it's so new that not enough organizations are using the products to be safe. And that's where the challenge is today. As a whole, we're way too much legacy. We have way too many exploitable vulnerabilities. No matter how much patching you do, it's never going to be enough to compete against the your adversary that can use zero day exploits to get through and do things. So I think strategically, we just as a whole, it's going to take us time to get everybody up to speed and using the right tools. Because I think right now everybody thinks it's too expensive, we can't afford it. That's not true. Like that, it's simply not true. If you're not making enough money to properly defend the organization, you're not in business. And if we can't convince business leaders that that's where the small amount of money that's needed to properly secure it, well then we're not good at our jobs, right? So I think it's going to start. I think we're going to get there, but I think it's going to take us a few years to get the industry there to the point where we're secure enough as a whole to defend against the bad guys who have got, even if they have mythos, I think we'll be fine and we will still win once it's generally released and once we've got everybody using the right kind of AI security products to protect them. That's what I think. But again, I'm the eternal optimist. So
I
what
love
do
it.
you
I
think?
love
Punch
it.
punch holes in it. I love this. Let's go.
Yeah. I'm a mix because as a CISO, right, I have to have that
Mhm.
pessimistic,
Yep.
put the brakes on, hold up.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but I also want to enable the business. I like that you mentioned kind of the various model. We've been talking about various models and the cost for some of these companies. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Uber blowing through their AI budget in the first quarter, right?
Yep.
Uh, how can these, and I'm trying to solve this. I talked about prior to starting, we talked about this kind of side project that I've been working on. How can we allow companies to develop and leverage AI in a way that they're not blowing through that budget to help them advance, not blowing through that budget, but also maybe then they can spend more on some of these technologies that are helping them defend
Yeah.
auditability of AI use. We talked about MCP and agents and skills and things that can run on your systems. How do you protect that? There are technologies out there, but what can also businesses do on their own to allow budget for maybe purchasing some of these other solutions, but still leveraging AI internally to
Yeah.
do the things they need to do. Um, and we've talked. There's a couple of companies out there. Open Router's doing some now where they're doing things like auto. You have to call them auto routing, right? Where they're taking and using the best model for the job. Instead of strictly using something like Opus 4.8 or Fable 5, they're able to downrank that model based on the task. So I've been working quite a bit on that technology, but being a CISO, I don't think we're doing it effectively yet. How do you monitor the AI, what's going into a prompt, what's coming back as a response, in a way that's auditable, that's secure? And where do you monitor that? Do you just monitor at the gateway? Well, by then it's already out of the network. So I think it needs to start very early. So I've been working on things right on the agent where they're doing the work. Let's capture that and then route that effectively
Mhm.
and securely, making sure we can audit it. It's traceable. And the users that are using the technology, and I say users loosely, human, non-human, right? Agent to MCP. How do you monitor that, control that, and then take a look at what's being sent? Things like DLP, right? Data loss prevention, PHI, PII. How do you manage that policy
Yep.
with what users should have access to, data? And then how do you price that? If you can downrank, you're going to save token rate. You're going to save a ton of money. If you don't, people are asking a model, what's 4 plus 4? I mean, simple example,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But they're sending that to Opus 4.8.
Yeah.
Send it to something that's not Opus 4.8. Send it to a local calculation on your laptop.
Yep.
Um, and again, even for simple tasks, do a diff between these documents. That's not a agentic task. That's a task that can run locally or on a certain. I just think people are using over dependence, right, on AI for simple tasks that could be offloaded, and it could be offloaded to an open weight model, free to run except for the compute cost. But use the AI for the things that AI is good at. So that's kind of the stuff I've been working at on the side. I went down this path and I wanted to understand AI. I'm a CISO. I want to understand how my users are using AI, right? I want my employees. How can I better protect the business and our company? Um, and not just my company, in general. How is AI used in my role as a CISO? How do we make sure that we're protecting our business?
Yeah.
And so I had to understand, and I wanted to say, okay, people are using Claude Code, people are using Cursor, people are doing development with various technologies, maybe multiple large language models. They're using it in the browser. How do I how do I protect the company if I don't understand how they're using it? So I started to, bought my own laptop. I wanted to really say, oh, they wanted to run, people are talking about running language models on their laptops. Okay, let me see how we do that, right? Um, as I started doing that, though, I was using Claude. Um, Holy cow. I kept getting put in timeout. I wanted to develop a simple app. My first app that I did was a Android app. I have a check register app that I've been using on my phone for years. Simple. I'm an old man. I keep track of my, checking savings.
Yeah.
Uh, I wanted to make the app do what I wanted it to do. It didn't quite function the way I wanted it to do. And I thought that was what a great project to really try using vibe coding, right? A simple,
Yeah.
small thing to vibe code this app for an
Sure.
Android. So I installed Claude Code. I installed a Olama and a local model so I could start playing with that. It didn't quite do what I needed to do. So then I really wanted to take advantage of Flagship, but I'm trying to balance that token cost.
Hmm.
I kept getting put in timeout by Anthropic. Hey, come back in 3 hours. You've used all the tokens for this session in your free tier. So then I upgraded to Pro. So I had more. Now I can do more. So I said, okay, I'm going to develop this website while I'm at it. I want to understand how that works. I want to understand. I'm a CISO, so how do I do like that whole? Can I build in my CI process? Can I do things like vulnerability assessment, SBOM generation, right? For my Android app now, and now I've got this website, and I'm going back and forth, and I just keep burning through the tokens.
Yeah.
It's nonstop, and I don't like to be put in timeout. I was an Army Ranger, man. I'm like, go go go. Let's
Yep. Yep.
keep moving forward, and here I am. Take a break, Mike.
Yep.
Um, and that's how this whole thing came about that I've developed. I started working with things like memory management. I did open source that not too long ago. So MemForge, I open source MemForge to really utilize tokens effectively. People, you're familiar obviously with the way context works with AI models.
Yep.
Some people aren't.
Yeah. Feel free. Let's, yeah.
Yeah,
Go.
you basically say, "How are you doing?" And the AI responds. And now you have that response and your initial message, but now you want to ask a follow-on question. That back and forth keeps accumulating and it gets bigger and bigger. That's context, right? If you don't control that context, that's what you end up eating, right? You're eating that token rate with that back and forth conversation. Conversations have to be concise. They have to be targeted at a specific topic. If you're going to switch topics, you want to basically refresh your session, start over. In some cases, though, you want to start over with some context, at least a portion of it. Maybe you had a previous conversation. You don't need the whole conversation, but there are components of that conversation that you want to recall. And that's really when I started doing this, and this was only a couple months ago that I started learning Claude Code, by the way, I had no clue. Um, I wanted to understand how I could better utilize that memory, right? So MemForge, what it does is it takes an index of kind of keywords and that'll trigger memory recall. So now if I say I want to work on something that's related to my architecture, it'll go and pull out an architecture list, right? And now I can say, okay, it's architecture, but it's memory. So I'm pulling in small pieces into context and only working with those. And that's really what MemForge is. It allows you to have that continuous recall of memory, but only the necessary memory to complete a task.
Right.
And especially when you start looking at things like agentic, doing orchestration, which I'm doing now. Now you want your agents to have access to that context because they'll need it to do their specific task. And now you can keep that agent working in a tight bubble as well. Your orchestrator, you may want to have more context because it's going to do things like I'm going to double check the agent's work. I have to know that this agent can work on this without breaking something that this agent is working on. But still trying to keep that token context or token use tight. Otherwise, you're going to go broke doing this stuff. As I found out quickly, I do now have like a max 20 plan. I'm trying to manage that, and I do burn through that doing large development. But I can tell you right now, combining that memory management with routing, smart routing, right? Um, Leveraging multiple models. I use things like Judge, uh, panels. It's definitely, but my data's. I can imagine having one developer doing something like this. Imagine thousands,
Yeah.
thousands at a Fortune 500 company, tens of thousands, doing something very similar. Where's that data going? How is it being used? What agents are MCP servers? What cloud providers are these going to? I think that's the challenge.
Well, is the solution, is the solution then localizing it to where now it's just local, right? You're not obviously not doing it on your laptop. That's not going to be nearly powerful enough. But NVIDIA makes some great, devices that you can buy for a few $1,000, drop it on your desktop, and now you've got the I guess the processing power to kind of go to town, right? And you've paid for you're now paying, instead of paying that token use to Anthropic or whomever, you've got a local model. Your data is staying local. Sure, it's not the latest model, right? But back to your point of, for the bulk of your work, does it need to be, or do we get to a point in the not too distant future where, the whatever you want to call it, that the last year's model is so good that it doesn't matter if you're using this year's, and so you use last year's or even last quarter's locally on your device, and now you're just burning through and doing what you need to do locally. Is that the future? And that kind of gets us there. You've got your data's secure, it's local, and you don't have the huge token rate. Now, that probably doesn't work for Anthropic or OpenAI, in that that's their model, right? It's all about selling the tokens. So how does that work if everybody's working locally and they're not having to pay, a subscription for tokens?
Yeah, I think it's happening now, and the solution that I developed does a mix of that. I have a routing matrix, right? And there are models out there, commercial models. Let's see, I can name one. Not Diamond is one, right? So they have a machine learning model that can do classification. So I've written something that does a similar thing without using machine learning model, but it does classification of tasks. You send a prompt, and now I can take that prompt and say, I, is this something that requires Opus 4.8, or is this something that can, is this a coding task, right? And is there enough context where I can farm this off, right, to something like Quen coder, or can I use a different open weight model? And what's the sensitivity of what I'm trying to send? Again, I mentioned DLP. Now, if you can add sensitivity with determining the task,
Yeah.
HR, for instance, right? HR is using something they want to send some type of employee information. They're uploading a document, right, that needs analysis. Can I send that to something that would be considered on-prem, right? So they may have their own cloud, their own data, a model focusing on that data, instead of directing it to Claude or Anthropic, they're going to use one interface, right? And that's how most people are working right now. They're going to go to ChatGPT or somewhere else to send everything, their document, the context. What if you can catch it in the middle before it gets to OpenAI? And you can redirect that based on the data that they're sending, the context, the sensitivity, the fact that they're in HR. Can I send that to something local?
Yeah. That's super cool. I mean, I know Perplexity is doing basically that without the sensitivity part, but I think that's so important. And I think that's the next step, right? I think that's really where we start to see things become more secure, more enterprise ready, really more business ready. Right now, it's early days. It's the wild, wild west. We need to figure this stuff out, and hopefully before there's a lot we need to figure out with AI before, we have AI overlords who decide that we're just a plague on the planet, right? But hopefully those days don't come and we figure it all out. Or I think worst case scenario, or also bad case scenario, I should say, we get to the point where AI is doing everything and we've destroyed the global economy because we haven't figured out how to manage it all. But all of that to say, this has been an absolute blast. I think we could do this all day. Super fun, Mike. I loved having you on here. Love to have you back on. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about Nference?
Yeah, Nference is nference.ai or nference.com, Nference, just like Inference, AI, Nference. I also support Anamana. They're another company to take a look at, anamana.ai. They are doing some great stuff with ECG and heart disease detection, all machine learning as well. So I would check out both. Thanks for having me. This has been an absolute blast.
It was so much fun. All right, Mike, until next time. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.